Hi everyone, welcome back and thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. Charles and Ivanka had been married for years, and from the sidewalk, their life looked ordinary in the best way. Two people making plans, stacking savings, and talking about a future with a front porch and a deed in a drawer. Inside their walls, the story wasn't that simple. Arguments had become habit, some over small frictions that shouldn't matter, some over bigger things that did, and all of them pointing at the same quiet truth. The distance between them was growing, one skipped understanding at a time. Charles loved his wife in a way that didn't look for the exit when things got loud. He wasn't flawless, but he showed up, he earned, he saved, and he held the plan for a house like a lifeline he refused to let go. He pictured a place that felt like arrival at last, a doorway neither of them would want to walk out of. Ivanka saw what he saw, and somehow didn't. One evening started like the others, had started too many times. Charles came home worn down by a day that had taken more than it gave, ready for quiet. The heir had other plans. Ivanka had asked for something. Charles had reminded her they couldn't afford it yet. She heard it as a stall, not a statement. What should have been a small disagreement turned into a familiar, bigger thing, and then into something sharper, older, and harder to fix. Her tone came out honed. It was easy for her to make him feel like the problem, like he was always short of the mark, no matter how close he came. "Why do I have to explain this to you over and over?" she snapped, rolling her eyes like punctuation. Charles tried to land his voice on level ground. "Ivanka, I'm trying. I really am. It just feels like nothing I do is ever enough for you." She let out a laugh without warmth. "Trying? That's what you call this? This isn't trying, Charles. This is you doing the bare minimum and hoping I applaud." The words cut deeper than she meant, or exactly as deep as she intended. He felt the heat rise in his chest at bare minimum. He could list the long hours, the lunches skipped, the balance in the savings app slowly growing because he willed it to, the things he had quietly gone without. What would be the point? A list wouldn't change a mind that had already chosen a story, and it was the dismissiveness, more than the disagreement, that landed hardest. Something in him gave. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, because the room had too little oxygen and too many old words. "I can't do this right now," he muttered, more to himself than to her, and stepped out into night air that felt like permission. He didn't know a different kind of air was waiting 2 turns later. He'd barely made it down the block before he realized he'd left his wallet and his card on the kitchen counter. Annoyance replaced anger. He couldn't go far without those. He circled back, opened the door quietly to avoid lighting another spark, and stepped into a house that didn't know it was about to break something that couldn't be taped. Ivanka's voice floated from the other room, on the phone. He wasn't listening. He only needed his wallet, then gone again before she noticed, until the sentence that froze him mid-step. "I settled for less." Cold moved through him like a second spine. He stood still, fingers hovering above the leather and plastic that had dragged them toward a down payment for years. "I should have been with Dean, but I needed stability." The room folded in. She kept talking. "Charles is a good man, but not the one I truly wanted from the start." The gravity in those words rearranged everything he thought he knew. Her half-hearted affection, the frequent arguments, the distance that felt like winter living under summer sky, the way she seemed to endure their marriage rather than live in it. It had never been about money the way she said it was. She meant it in the other currency, the one made of choosing and wanting. She had never loved him in the way he had loved her. Charles picked up his wallet and card silently and left the way he had come, the door closing without complaint behind him. The night air was cool and useless. His feet took him down streets he didn't name until a bar's quiet neon gave him a place to sit down. He wasn't a regular there. It didn't matter. He needed a stool, a glass, and a corner where truth could land without an audience. He ordered a beer, sipped bitterness, and found it mild compared to the taste in his mouth. He had spent years fighting for a future that belonged to both their names, believing rough patches were just that, believing his love had weight enough to anchor them through the wind. It had been a faith project. She had settled, and in doing so, had put him in a marriage sustained by convenience, not choice. He thought briefly about going home and confronting the words she'd given the phone, but not him. What would he say? "I know. I heard you." She could apologize. She could cry. She could promise chemistry after the fact. None of that would change the fact that her heart was already elsewhere, long before her voice told the truth. He watched the amber through glass until a decision he didn't know he could make arrived quietly and fully. He would leave. Not for an hour. Not to cool down. For good. He would vanish, take his name out of her daily sentences, give her what she had been reaching toward when she thought no one was listening. The freedom to be with the man she should have chosen in the first place. There was nothing to salvage. He ordered another beer and let the decision settle like a new law. This would be the last night he spent as Ivanka's husband. By morning, he would be gone. While the house slept, Charles sat washed by the laptop's pale blue. If she wanted a different man, he wouldn't argue with gravity. But he also wouldn't walk away with his hands empty after years of carrying. He logged into their joint savings. It was easy. He had always handled their finances. The number returned his stare. The house fund they had coaxed into existence month after month. He moved what was his, the $80 he had single-handedly contributed. He didn't pull cash like a thief. He converted it smart, resellable assets purchased online. Electronics with receipts. Rare collectibles that hold value. Items easy to liquidate a zip code away. No trips to the bank. No flags. No noise. When he was done, he cleaned the trail-deleted confirmations, cleared inbox echoes, made sure no breadcrumb could be traced by a mourning mind. Then he packed. Only essentials documents, a few changes of clothes, things that make the next step possible. Nothing sentimental. Nothing in that house told a story worth carrying. Before he left, he sat at the desk that had held budget plans and house listings and wrote on a blank page that did not deserve a longer letter. The truth had already been spoken, just not to his face. He wrote with a steady hand. "I overheard everything. I won't stand in the way of your happiness. Go settle with your ideal partner. No accusations. No fight." Just a final sentence, closing a chapter that had already ended in her mind. By morning, Charles was gone. Ivanka woke expecting the usual sequence coffee. Silence from last night. Eventually the reset. The note sat where his coffee mug should have been. The words bent her stomach into a cold knot. He knew. Panic arrived with a speed she hadn't thought she could feel. She called his phone. The sound returned nothing. Called again. Again. Disconnected. She typed an email. A short plea, plain words, and pressed send. Undeliverable returned instantly like an insult. She opened social media. His account had been erased like a chalk line in the rain. Desperation got busy. Call his job. Hours of ringing later, a receptionist answered like the world hadn't tilted. "Charles?" He resigned this morning. Emailed before office hours. Effective immediately. The grip she had on the phone turned white. This wasn't a flare of temper after a fight. It was a plan executed cleanly, the kind of plan made by someone who had decided completely. He had erased himself from her map in a night and left her with a note and the mirror of her own sentences. With Charles gone, she no longer needed to lie by omission. She no longer needed to pretend. She turned all the way toward Dean, the man she had told the night air she should have chosen. The affair that had lived in whispers and last-minute changes turned into public plans. No husband to avoid. No guilt heavy enough to keep her from sleeping. At first, it felt like proof she had been right. Dean said the right things, filled her with the manufactured certainty that she had re-aimed her life wisely. There was heat, excitement, a rush that had been missing at home. This, she told herself, was the life she deserved. A few months after Charles disappeared, Ivanka finished the paperwork and filed for divorce. He was nowhere to be found. The court processed the quiet absence, and a default judgment landed in her favor. Just like that, She was single, legally free, past tense, married. For a while, it looked perfect on the outside. Time did what time does. It revealed the pattern behind the words. Dean was charming in the sun and absent in the weather that demands more than flirting. He loved in the ways that cost the least. Messages, moments, and eyes that wandered. When talk got heavy, commitment, future, lines on paper, he changed the subject like he'd been trained to. Then truths arrived that she'd chosen not to see. Dean didn't belong to anyone. He continued to entertain other women, kept connections on the side, maintained a life where she was an addition, not a foundation. What she labeled a deep love turned out to be convenience with better lighting. He had never intended to offer her anything like the thing she had walked away from. Comparisons she once used against Charles now returned with different clothes. Charles, despite the arguments and the fatigue and the stubborn silences, had been reliable. He showed up, not just with his body, but with his attention. Even when it was hard, he stayed. He fought, maybe not in the way she wanted, but in the way that tries. He sacrificed comfort, dreams, and dollars for a future with both their names on it. Dean had given her thrills, and nothing that survives ordinary days. No sacrifices, no structure, no plan beyond next weekend. And then it dawned in full. She hadn't settled for less. She had thrown away something real for something shiny that wouldn't keep. What she had with Charles wasn't perfect. It was genuine. What she had with Dean was everything she thought she'd wanted, until time asked it to prove itself. Years passed, and Ivanka remained single. The man she had put on the pedestal labeled ideal refused to climb the last step. Marriage talk turned into jokes, then dismissals, then changes of subject. At first she told herself it was timing. He'll be ready. He wasn't. The truth arrived slowly and painfully. Dean had never been serious about her. When arguments sharpened, he never missed his line. "I never asked you to leave your husband." It split her every time. Humiliation mixed with anger, and the kind of regret that wakes you up at 3 a.m. and won't sit back down. He wasn't wrong. He had never promised her forever. He had never asked her to walk away. That was her signature alone. And now, every once in a while, thoughts of Charles came like a tide. Where is he? Is he happy? Did he build the life they planned with someone who wanted it? Did he find a porch and a deed and a smile that stayed? The more she tried to banish those questions, the louder they came back. She had a man who loved her, willing to build, willing to bend, and she traded him for a man who never saw her as anything but optional. So what sits inside this story when the names are gone? That value often hides in ordinary clothes, and people mistake thrill for worth until the bill arrives. That the small, quiet efforts of someone who cares are invisible until they're absent, and then their outline is everywhere. That the things we say out loud about our partners, especially when we think they can't hear, can either reinforce a roof or pry up the beams. Love without respect and trust is just noise. Passion without companionship and honesty is only a fireworks display. Bright, loud, and gone. If you don't value someone's presence, you may have to learn how to live with their absence. Charles didn't leave in fury. He left because he understood that staying where you're not chosen hurts both people in every slow way. Some people fight no matter what. Others learn the difference between resilience and self-erasure and let go before the house collapses on them. So, what do you think? Did Charles make the right choice by leaving? Or should he have stayed and tried to rescue a marriage already half buried in truth neither of them could afford to ignore? Until next time, take care and stay wise.